Hi, welcome to another video. I've finally got the modular front ready to go onto the Prusa Box. If you are looking to add this sort of front onto your enclosure, it doesn't have to go onto a Prusa Box. There is a version that is self-contained and can attach externally. So please check out the Printerbox website and you'll see a couple of different STL sets. One to mount on the Prusa Box, one to go onto other enclosures. Right, if you've seen the other videos, I've been working on Raspberry Pi, putting on a power switch and LED, etc. So that's all set now. So let's have a quick look before we start attaching these items. So we have the screen and we have the display. Let's have a quick look at the display. I have actually put all the little square nuts in all the slots already, and I have already taken the LCD and used 4 bolts to screw it on. That was nice and simple. I think nobody should have any issues with that. So here we have the Waveshare 5-inch screen. Let's take that off carefully. That is held in by the clips that are printable for this size of screen off of the STL. So again, just put the square nuts in, a couple of bolts, and it's been placed in. The ribbon cable is not the Waveshare ribbon cable because that is only about 5 or 6 centimeters long. You need a much longer cable, so I have purchased a new ribbon cable. As you can see, it goes from one end to the other. If you've seen my video on the LED, power LED, the LED is in the corner there. The soft power down button, again separate video, is here. I have actually put one bolt in here just so it doesn't all fall apart. Raspberry Pi, there are just literally just 2 screws holding that in. It screws directly into the plastic. I've got a 30mm fan in the end. I have actually made a little end plate as well, and I'll include the STL on that, but I've actually glued the fan cover plate onto the fan because I couldn't really find any screws, unfortunately, that would fit. So, but there are screw holes as well if you happen to have some screws. The fan is connected again by a USB. Now, you could put the fans onto the 3.5 or 5 volt GPIO pins and that would be fine. The thing is, when I pop the Pi into standby using the standby button here, those pins are still live. The board is still live, so the fans will just keep on going and going and going until you actually power off the actual power supply itself, if you've got a switch or unplug it. So I've decided that both my fans will be connected into the USB ports because when I put it into standby, the USB ports also go into standby and it will shut the fans down. So we've done quite a lot so far. The next step is really putting all the bolts in and fixing this together, and we've got a center rail here to fit in, and then obviously the back plates. And with the LCD module, you can obviously with some pliers or a knife just take out any extra holes you need for cabling. I need to take out a couple more because I've got cabling for lighting and temperature module that are going to go through here and into a central switch. Now You can use this type of joiner. I've got a one that's got 3 switches in it, which is currently in use at the moment, so you'll see that in a second. The first thing I would suggest is the back plate that goes behind the Prusa control LCD. Work out what cables you've got coming through. So we've got the ribbon cables coming through. In my case, I've got also lighting and temperature control as well, plus I have the cable for the printer itself. In fact, this is quite a long cable. I will get a shorter one very shortly, but that has to be accounted for as well, and then anything else. So if you do need to make room, you can easily just get some pliers and pull and make these knockouts come out and tighten them up with a knife so there's no sharp edges. So I'm just going to work out what I need and then pass those cables through. This is how I've wired mine up. The 2 ribbon cables, the USB to go to the printer, and the lighting and temperature control cables which go to the center switch. And I've just had to cut out an extra one because one of my cables was slightly too short to use the cutouts, so I've just made a cutout with a knife there. So that's how that part looks. So I'm now going to go to the next step. So the next thing I'm going to do is basically add all of the bolts so that both the LCD and the Octodash display and Pi are all as one. So I've just got the screws around the base here and the centre part. Obviously it's a bit fiddly having the wires here already, and I'm just going to do the same with this part. I've actually started to put the bolts in the bottom and then I'm going to join it together. So all the bottom bolts are in. What I'm going to do now is put bolts into here, and they're like self-tappers. They just go straight into the plastic. So the first thing I would recommend is popping the 2 ribbon cables into the back of the display, otherwise those are going to be very fiddly. And what I'm going to do now, I've got 2 bolts in the centre rail. I've mounted the centre one already. That just has 1 bolt from the bottom, and I'm going to try popping that on at least loosely. That will get the unit in, and then I'm going to get the cable sorted afterwards. Right, after reprinting the 2 parts, it's still not flush enough to be able to get the bolts to engage, so I've ended up finding some slightly longer bolts, but they're the the sort that the Prusa printer is made out of. So I've got one in, that's gone in straight away, no problem at all. I wish I'd found these earlier rather than reprinting the back. But still, that's the way it is. So I'm going to pop the second one in the bottom here, and then I'm going to do the back plate with all the cables. So after a little bit of faffing around, I've got all 4 bolts in. A little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Thought that would be just straightforward, but anyway, they're in. So it's just a case of tidying up the cables a little bit now and connecting up the cable here we've got to the printer, and also connecting up the Raspberry Pi. And let's zoom out a little bit. So I expect to go from the Raspberry Pi along this side to the back of the printer with the power supply for that, all the way back to the buck converter. So let's have a go at doing that now. I'm going to be using these little cable clips, self-adhesive 3M, to actually clip the USB to the Pi. Now we're at the buck converter. One great thing about the Prusa Box is I've been able to take all the doors off, so I've got great access to all of this. Now I've got the Raspberry Pi power supply here. It has to plug into the 5-volt USB, so I'm going to plug that in now. Move a couple of these other cables out of the way just while I do that. Yeah, I have got it the right way around. And just slide that in. This particular USB is a little bit large. There we go. Just needed to be horizontal. Right. So hopefully you can see that. Let's get a bit more light on here so you get a better view. So it's really just a case now of neatening up the cables, which I think I can do. There we go. Right, let's pop the lid back without pinching any cables. That looks good. Just going to tighten that up. There we go, it's tight. Great. Now if we have a further look, you'll see we've got a lot of cable here. This is the cable going from the Pi to the Prusa. I have ordered a much shorter cable. That doesn't come for a couple of days, and I still wanted to get this video out, so I will be replacing this cable with a much shorter one and just using the self-adhesive cable tidies to keep the cable out of the way. For the moment I'm just going to tuck it out here. I don't plan on using the printer much anyway for the next couple of days, so excuse that at the moment. So after all that fitting, this is the result, and I'm glad that the Prusa display is finally angled so I can read it, because when it was vertical it was just so difficult to read, especially if you're standing up. Really pleased the way it's come out. We have the screen that's active now, and also I don't know whether you can hear, but there's a fan that's working as well, 30mm fan. Now earlier I did put a 40mm fan in this end, but it was just too noisy, so I've taken that out in the final build. I've whipped it out quickly. Here it is here. So I've just got the 130mm fan. There are 2 entry points here for air, so it's going to be sucking air through and out of the unit there. So I'm happy just with the one, otherwise it just really is quite noisy. Switches here, I've got a switch for the light, middle switch here for temperature control. If I want the I've got the thermometer on the side. If you're not sure about that, have a look at one of my previous videos about installing the extractor fan and temperature control. And a third switch, which I'm not sure what I'm going to do with yet. I may make a fan intake under the board, under the motherboard, where there's a little grill, so I may have a fan intake there, obviously not for using for ABS, but for other things that need a bit more cooling. I may possibly use that as a control, so watch this space if you're interested in that, because if you're doing PETG or PLA, this unit gets really hot. I've got the button on the side of the unit to be able to shut down the Pi as well, so I'll show you that again in a moment, but that's now shutting down and the fan will go off in a second. I've also got an LED at the bottom that shows when the unit is on, although now with the fan going I can hear that it's on. So let's have a closer look. So we have the SD card slot here, which is rather nice, works very well. As you can see, it's picked that SD card up straight away. I'll just take that out again. Very nice. 3 switches. You can either have no switches or 1 switch or 2 switches. There's various different mouldings on the Printerbox site to allow you to have a different number of switches, but I will be using all 3. And then we have a 5-inch screen. You can get bezels for 4-inch and 3.5-inch. I wanted the larger screen. And around here we have the fan, and we have the soft stop start button for the Pi. And below there is an LED which I've recessed quite a lot, mainly because it's quite bright, but it could be stuck out a little bit further. So it's a power light, and if I just press the power off on here, it will start up. As you can see, the LED's on, the screen's coming on, and it will just boot up, and you may or may not be able to hear that the fan has just started. So the fan starts and stops because it's connected to the USBs, as I've mentioned earlier in the video. So I've got Octodash installed on that, and hopefully it will eventually boot up. The webcam as well, that's all wired up, so that's wired into the Pi. Cables are reasonably tidy, apart from the one at the end, which is the one going to the printer, because I will wait for a new one to arrive later today. Right, there's Octodash, nice big screen. So yeah, overall a good build. It's actually off the ground as well. It's about flush with the bottom of the enclosure. That means it's off by about 10mm because of the feet, so there's good clearance there as well, so I'm pleased with that. So what's next? You might think that's it, but I plan to take this side piece out, replace it with the module that's designed for the temperature control and PWM fan control. I have redesigned it with a Pi button on the side, and redesigned it to have a fan in the side as well, which it didn't. So that will be going in there. And this version I've designed so the Noctua speed controller can actually fit inside. This is not easy doing it with one hand, but it will actually go inside there. There we go. So that's what that will look like if you're using the Noctua speed control. But I will also do a version for the PWM and the W1219, and I've actually just got hold of one, although it's got the same coloured LEDs rather than different coloured LEDs that most people are using. But it'll be good enough to try it out in this module. So I've just got to adapt another version, and I'll be adding that onto the side. That means that people will be able to see what it looks like full length. I also plan to add some power supply cooling as well, so watch this space. So I hope that was reasonably informative. If you're interested in seeing more like this, certainly on Prusa Box and other enclosures and 3D items, please like, and if you can subscribe, that would be really appreciated. Just press that button down the bottom to subscribe. I'd really appreciate that, and look forward to giving some more helpful tutorial videos in the future.